Hi and welcome. Today I'm gonna do something that I usually don't. I'm gonna review another existing video. This is on learning how to build a full stack app from scratch using database SQL Server and backend .NET Web API and front-end Angular. So this is traditional coding, and I thought that it would be real beneficial for us to compare this to low-code or no-code strategies as we do with the MDriven and model-driven development. So I'm going to have the link to the original course in this video comments, so you can follow along there if you want, but it's really long. It's like 1.5 hours long. So what I did was I started it up and pretty quick I switched to.
In this course, you will learn how to develop a web application from scratch using popular technologies such as SQL Server for database, .NET Web API for backend development.
And you can hear it's a robotized voice, which, well, you can dislike my accent, but hey, it's human.
The latest Angular 10 for front-end web development. We will first start with installing and setting up the environment needed for development.
Yeah.
Then start creating databases and objects needed for our app. Then develop API endpoints using ASP.NET Web API.
So first there's a section where he shows what the resulting application does. So we're gonna watch that one. It's quite short.
Add routing to our Angular app. Add modal pop-up windows with drop-downs and date pickers. And also add upload profile picture functionality and store it in our app. We will also learn how to add custom filtering and sorting features without using any third-party packages. I thank you for...
So basically it's a department and an employee. That's the two classes that we have in this system. And then there's UI to create or delete departments and create and delete employees per department. Then there's a section when he shows how to install the various tools, and this is good. It's straightforward installing SQL Server, and then he installs, or she, I don't know, Visual Studio, and then Visual Studio Code, and also Postman. And Postman is a good tool for debugging REST APIs and .NET traffic or any web traffic. And then it's Node.js. And finally Angular. Then he starts by creating the database and the tables needed within. So he's starting up Managemt server for SQL Server, and then he goes back to look at the original application, which of course isn't existing yet, but he's doing a bit of time traveling here so that he knows what to put in the database. The department name for the department table, and then he inserts IT and support departments. And then he creates the employee table with an employee name and reference to the department and a date of joining and a photo file name. Yeah. So let's stop there for a while. Now he has actually already decided what information that should be hosted in this system at this point, and all of the rest, the rest of the hour, he will spend trying to fill this database with information and showing that UI, visualizing that information and enabling change to that information. And this is pretty standard. This is what all information systems does. So it's a great tutorial video on how to do traditional coding. The interesting part here is, should we do traditional coding this way, or is there another way? And of course, since I'm an advocate for MDriven, a low code or /no code or model driven approach to any kind of information management, I want to point out the differences. So let's see what we could do different with the MDriven Designer instead, or with MDriven. So I download the Click Once installation. There's also a local installation if that's more to your liking. Gonna clear everything out and start anew. I create classes, the department class and the employee class. I'm adding attributes to the classes, and changing the data types to match what the data type should be. I bind them together with associations, and I'm going to save the file. So by now I have done pretty much what he did for the database. I have the department with the name, I have the employee with the date joining the name and the picture, and I have an association saying that the department has many employees and the employee has one department. What I can do now is to have MDriven doing the auto forms for us, just doing the minimal details needed for this to show. And having done that, I can just press play and do local prototyper and start that. And sort of have a seeker for finding departments and adding employees. Save that. But back to the video. So as he has done the database, he now starts to work with the API to get access to the data in the database. So he does a Visual Studio project to create a web API project, and having done this, he needs to add controllers. And return JSON data. And the JSON data needs to be so he first just do some examples. Then he goes into a discussion about CORS. And CORS is a security precaution from the browsers to stop cross-referencing just without any order. So you as a site owner can control which ones that are allowed to call you. And doing CORS with MDriven is pretty straightforward. let's see, I'm going to the wiki at MDriven and searching for course. So what we have done is a sort of a model pattern to enable course to point out which domains should be okay to access your APIs from an MDriven server. So that's quite a quick fix on that. Once he has the web API project up, he starts to do view models, sort of. The models for accessing the data from the database into a displayable format, or rather a transportable format over the web API. You see what's happening here. He needs to repeat all the things from the database layer once more. The employee ID, the employee name, the department, date of joining and photo, etc. And then for each implementation to actually get this, he needs to again write the properties that he needs to fetch and the table he needs to fetch it from. And he needs to have a connection string to get access to this data. And then he can try it with the Postman to see that it actually works. And then again, when there's changes to the data, he needs to once again handle the values. So here comes again the department name, etc. So this is really tedious and error-prone work that needs to be tested thoroughly to ensure that it works. And what is remarkable is that so few work with low-code / no-code / model-driven approaches, because all these layers are really implied once you have the model. Once you have the model, you really only need to say it once, and then you have automation and code that maintains the database for this and the database for this, the view model for this and the view model for this, the memory representation of this and the memory representation of that. So there are very many layers introduced in traditional software development that you need to maintain, and they should always describe the same thing. And the thing they should describe is the mental model of the system that you're doing. So the data within and the information within. And this is really remarkable that no one, or so few, has reached the conclusion that, of course, if you don't only make the model mental, but you make it in reality, like this, like an UML model, and then have, instead of writing code each time for each given model, write generic code that applies a model, well then 99% of all the steps just melt away. And what happens when it melts away is that the maintenance is reduced, the speed of development, time to market is increased, the quality goes up because it now works the same way all the time, no room for error in typing, etc. So let's continue to see what he does after the API operations. Goes on quite a bit. It's a lot of work to write the SQL scripts, etc. And then he comes to this section where he's going to upload a photo, because photos and really all kind of binary larger object or blobs information is handled a little bit differently than values, data values. So he needs to implement something special for that. And once he's done with that, he starts with the front end code that he's gonna do with Angular. So in Angular, he wants to create, again, he does a bit of time travel. He goes back to see how it will look in the, or he goes ahead in time to see what the aim is, what the target is. So he wants it to look like this. And he abstracts this and thinks about how to all the different views needed. And he creates an Angular project, which is a boilerplate that he then deletes part of and just introduces hello world. And then he starts actually implementing the different view components in Angular, and now he uses Visual Code instead of Visual Studio. Now he needs the methods on the front end then that will actually fetch the data from the back end. So now once more he repeats the idea of the model and the information, but in another language, JavaScript this time, or rather TypeScript, and pretty much does the same thing, but now he accesses the API and hope that it matches what he did there. So quite a lot of work doing that. Now he adds Bootstrap, which is a strategy to make things display nicely on the screen, which it's a UI metaphor. Once he's here, he wants to start with navigations, because we need some way for the user to navigate the application. As we do here, we have the Auto Forms menu, which was fastly created for us, and we can search departments and we can click up to show a department, and we can show the employees within the department. Things like that. That's navigation. And it doesn't come without effort. So there's some work associated with that. And then once the action for navigation is done, he needs to open up views, and he needs to tie all this up. So you have something that looks like that. And now he wants the edit of an employee to be in a modal window that pops up. Instead of navigating away from the window, it should be something that floats on top. So that's quite a lot of work with that. And the edit screens. Let's see, so here's the modal coming along. Let's see if I can find it. There. Add department. Okay. Delete department. So if we wanted in our application to have this one pop up as a modal instead, we would state so in the model, because the views for this is driven by the declarative view models that we did with the auto forms. We can of course change these any way we want. We can move things around, add and remove other stuff, but just for simplicity we have the auto forms. And from the department seeker we see that we have actions, and one of the actions brings up show department. And if we wanted the department to be, or rather we can go to the view of one department and show department. And then I would get it modal instead. And let's see, he's still on creating the UI for these things. And then he starts with the upload picture and add or edit the employee screen. Quite a lot of work with that. Again, all the attributes from the model is repeated, but now in front-end code. And he needs to repeat it multiple ways for updating it and for getting it from the API. And he needs to treat the photo differently because it's a separate data type which isn't posted. It's uploaded with the stream API of the browser. And here he adds some logic for sorting and filtering this. The video all in all was 1 hour and 37 minutes, I think. And the benefits of using traditional coding compared to model-driven or low-code, no-code strategies is really hard to see and to find. And of course this is also a very fixed example because he already knew exactly what he needed, and he's not sure that or he's pretty sure that nothing's going to change. But in reality things change all the time. So the department might be part of a company, right? And the company has many departments and there's a name on the company. And things like this happen all the time in development. And as soon as we have done this, all of the work here must be amended on all the different levels. From the database to the back end to the front end. And all is manual labor. And there's room for errors in every step. Whilst in a thing like low-code, no-code and MDriven, model-driven development, you would simply amend the model, which is a perfect high-level description of what it actually is that you do. And you could just update these auto forms, and once you've done that, you would have the new so you can do a new company and you can add departments. So if we take a look at it from a high-level perspective, from a management perspective, coding versus no code with MDriven, stupid or smart? Well, getting the job done, both will do it. MDriven, much faster. Ease of development. Well, I'm biased, but I would say that MDriven is much easier because there are fewer things involved and fewer moving parts, and a high-level description of what you want to accomplish. And the same thing here. MDriven wins on effort to maintain and change. And of course the cost of owning is pretty much tied to the efforts to maintaining and changing something. So I would say that MDriven wins here as well. So documentation of the solution. Of course, the developer would need to add considerable amount of documentation to describe all these layers for some other junior developer or other developer taking over the logic. And the same is pretty much true here, but what separates the strategies is that this is very controlled to the model that you have described. And most of the code is reused. So if you look at this code and inspect this, you would see that the sources, this is also an Angular app, and this is also having a front end with bindings, etc. It's just that it was generated automatically and derived from the documentation of the system, the mental model of the system, which isn't only mental but is tangible and real in MDriven. So I would say that MDriven wins. Dependency on skill set. Well, in the traditional development you had all of these necessary skills. The database, SQL Server and SQL Script, of course. In the back end, he used C#, and for the front end, he used Node.js, which is JavaScript based, and he used TypeScript, and all these different frameworks is it's quite a bit, lot of stuff to learn, to remember, to be efficient. Whilst here you are primarily in standards, UML, Unified Modeling Language, and OCL, Object Constraint Language. So that's pretty straightforward, and it's one thing. And what's good with UML, that it is designed for being straightforward and easy to understand. It pretty much described how any sane person thinks. It's classes with associations and attributes, and that turns into objects in runtime describing the same relations. And what MDriven does with the model-driven approach is that it reduces the number of degrees of freedom how the information can be put together in a very good way. It's only the exact things that you define in the model. But that doesn't really limit you, because you can express anything in the model. So it's not a limitation, it just removes all the definitions that would be treated as errors or bugs. So of course you can still do a lot of think bugs that you have understood the problem wrong, but there's really no room for that much coding bugs in a model-driven approach, which it is with the standard approach. So I would say that MDriven actually wins this one. So, and the dependency on original developer. Well, it's the same thing. It's the documentation and how easy I can explain this to someone, even if I'm not there. If I die tomorrow, will someone else be able to understand this model? Yes, they would. But if this developer dies tomorrow, is it equally easy for any developer to understand all of this tomorrow? No, it isn't. It will work, of course. Any developer, any good developer can put some effort into it and understand another developer's code. That's not what I'm saying, that it would be impossible. It's just that this is so much easier. It's so much fewer moving parts. So that concludes my video for today, and I hope you found it interesting. And of course, this is probably not true for only MDriven. I think it's the same for most low-code or no-code tools. Why I'm using MDriven is just that it is so extremely close to traditional development. It does all of these steps very clearly. We have the data in a SQL Server database. We have a C# developed web API to have all the data in it, and we have an Angular front end doing the rendering. It's just that instead of spending days on getting this hooked up for a known case, we can spend minutes on getting it hooked up for a known case. And instead of spending days of adding and maintaining things, once we know that the known case is extended with new requirements, we can spend just minutes or seconds on adding new things to the model and have it documented and running within minutes. So, something to think about. Thank you for listening.